What's going on, guys? Dr. Andrew Fix back for another episode here on the Code. So excited to have you guys with us and excited to be bringing another awesome interview to you guys. Again, like I always say, we appreciate your time tuning into this episode, whether it's the first one you've listened to or you've listened to dozens of other ones. Thank you for being here and tuning in to us. So today, like I said, we've got an interview lined up. We're speaking with Allie Beckmann. She is a financial advisor, you guys, and she specifically specializes in working with creative and service-based entrepreneurs in a very mission-driven kind of way. So to kick it off a little bit, I'll just tell you guys, I spoke with Allie one time. We got connected through, through social media, through LinkedIn. And we had one conversation, and I just knew we had to have another one. We had to have her on the show to talk about financial health, financial wellness, and how that impacts like our life and what we're able to do and how we're able to do it and make an impact. So, Allie, thanks for joining us and being on the Code.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, what I would love to do, Allie, is just have you give us a little bit more thorough of a background and introduction of yourself. Like, how did you get into what you're doing? Where are you from? And just sort of introduce yourself to all the listeners.
Yeah. A bit of a winding story, but I'll hopefully make it interesting and not too long. Financial planning and advising is my third career, and came to it through way of being a theater artist for 15 years and a yoga and meditation instructor, and business owner for 5 years as well. Those theater and yoga are my heart. It's where my heart still belongs. I still am a performing artist. I've been practicing yoga for 14 years. That's not going away. And the thing that ended up making me turn toward financial planning or really just career change was during COVID. And as you talk about the link between our health and our wealth, like it never became more clear to me during the beginning of COVID. All of my industries were shut down. Fortunately, my yoga business, I was able to take online, but I hit a wall during this late spring, early summer of 2020, when I had this moment of panic, just realizing that I was trying to rebrand and rework my corporate wellness business at the time and just couldn't access my brain. I literally could see myself hitting a wall and unable to access my creative thinking, my organizational, strategic thinking, things that are my innate strengths. And then that accelerated the panic of just realizing something is really off here. And so that then catalyzed me. And then the space of COVID in conjunction with that really catalyzed me to pull back and assess what was and wasn't working in my life. And at the root of all of the things that were not working, I was able to deduce was financial insecurity. I never, the irony is I excelled at math as a student and have always been really tightly aware of my own bookkeeping and numbers. As a self-employed artist for 15 years, I never had a steady salary. And so tracking my money was never a problem, but I was never taught anything beyond how to save in the most basic of ways. And so, I've never been driven by making money. I've never been motivated by money. For me, it's always been mission and impact and art and, people.
Yeah.
And so, once I realized that so much of my other stressors were related to not prioritizing my own financial security, I realized okay, that's where we need to start creating solutions. So I looked to make a career change, did not plan on going into finance, but it ended up finding me through my network and, someone who had been working. I started on the insurance side of the industry, had a friend at New York Life who had been there for 15 years and saw something in me that he thought would fit there. And so it was totally out of the blue for me, just coming from a pretty non-traditional life, going into a very traditional sector. But honestly, once I evaluated the opportunity and did my due diligence talking to people, I realized it made a lot of sense for me because I do have a very split brain between the right and the left side. I have an analytical, strategic side of the brain, and then I have the creative, social, emotional relationship side of the brain. And I'm like, man, finance seems like a great place to exercise both of those sides of myself. And as far as my mission goes, regardless of my industry, I've always been passionate about education, using education to empower more people and make an impact. And so again, I'm like, man, that still really fits in line in finance. I mean, the opportunity to make a real impact in people's lives that has tangible, deep meaning is so ripe. So I saw that opportunity, and having been an entrepreneur my whole life, I liked the possibility of continuing to stay my own boss. And honestly, I said the worst thing that could happen is I try it, I learn a bunch of stuff, and if it doesn't work out, I'll go do something else. But after my first year at New York Life, I won the Rookie of the Year award for the state of Colorado,
Awesome.
and realized I had something going for me. And then ended up on my journey of independence. So I found a different firm and was with them for a little bit. And now I've broken away and am going fully independent. So yeah, that's kind of the long short of how I got here today.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I kind of like it because I think I was actually having this conversation with a client earlier today about some of the positive things, and I think there's a lot of them, but that have come out of the fact that we all went through COVID, right? Like we all went through this pandemic, and a lot of people's worlds got turned upside down, whether
Yeah.
that be financially or mentally or spiritually or like whatever ly word you want to use. There were a lot of good things that came out of it too, and one of them is I think a lot of people were forced to or learned to pivot into something else, right? Whether that's a
Yeah.
different career path or a different relationship or a different living environment or whatever that might be. And you're one of those people. And
Yeah.
it was interesting because, you know, I think it's cool that you work or you try to specialize in working with the type of people that you do, entrepreneurs or people that are in service-based industries or people that are in like the creative art space, because a lot of times those are the people who like finance isn't like the thing that they're thinking about, right? And
Exactly.
I think that happens in our profession too, on the medical side, from being a physical therapist. Every young person that I've ever spoke with, and I asked them, why do you want to go to physical therapy school? The answer is almost always because I want to help people.
Hmm.
And as you know, you could be in a lot of different vocations and you can help people in a lot of different ways. Realtors help people find homes that they make memories in, and you help
Yeah.
people afford those things and structure a plan to support their family. And we help people be able to use their body the way that they want to use it. So, like, those people who just want to invest in other people,
Mm.
usually finances aren't the main motivator to why they got into the career path that they did. But at the end of the day, we know we all have bills, we all have things that we need to afford, whether it's
Yeah.
cost of living or it's putting fuel in your car, like whatever it is. You have to have a margin to drive your mission forward. So
Right.
if there's no margin, there's no mission, and businesses don't stay afloat, and you can't keep the lights on. So no, I think it's great. How did one of the things that I was curious when you were saying, you boiled down some of the challenges to this root of like having insecurity around the finances.
Mhm.
What types of things were you noticing that like you were feeling about the finances that you were noticing like, wow, I have like a money mindset or a financial insecurity that I'm becoming aware of, in case other people might be feeling the same thing? Like, what types
Mm.
of things did you start to notice about yourself or about clients that you work with, kind of around that conversation?
Yeah. Interesting question. I mean, I money has always been a hurdle for me because again, it was, I mean, frankly, a lot of it stemmed from my own self-worth issues that
Hmm.
stem
Yeah.
back a long way. I got serious about investigating my money mindset in 2019, like early 2019, so far before the pandemic. But I think because I had been doing some of that work, maybe I was primed to recognize it. But the way that scarcity or lack mindset showed up for me, um, it narrowed my perspective. It was harder for me to see broadly and far, right? Like
Hmm.
if someone asked me what my life would look like in a year, no way I could have answered. Like I couldn't see past, I didn't have the security to think long term. And so I couldn't plan, right? It was all driven more by survival and like needing to make it work next week. How am I making money
Mm-hmm.
next week? I was classically the person who always had like multiple jobs, like running around everywhere. So that was one, like my perspective got really narrow.
Yeah.
For my own personality, I have a strong streak of type A that conflicts with my free spirit. So they're constantly at war with each other. But honestly, I think when I get into that mindset, I know even still, if I can slip back into that place, I become more, it's similar to the perspective answer, but it just like, I become more critical of like things around me. It's right. It's the hypervigilance of that
Mm-hmm.
survival mode. I've studied
Yeah.
trauma for many, many years, and it's a similar state of response, right? It's like we're living in that survival state. So again, I just can't see as clearly, and I'm more likely to focus on what's wrong and what I don't have, all the things I don't have that I want. And then that's a spiral. And that would extend to, I noticed it impacting my relationships, right? And then that
Sure.
starts to interfere with my ability to truly be open and receptive in a relationship, which then that starts getting reflected back in certain ways from the other person because they're not getting from
Mm-hmm.
me what they want and need. So I think that's a big part of it. My sense of humor goes down, like
Yeah.
things get more literal. So I think it all kind of comes back to that, like it impacts my perspective. And fortunately I have 14 years of, daily meditation under my belt. So I'm developed in the muscle of metacognition and that self-awareness to recognize when that stuff is happening. And yeah, I think, if anyone listening is starting to experience those stressors, do that root cause analysis to just, figure out like, where is it really coming from?
Yeah.
And identifying how it manifests is a great tool to then stay on top of it. If it, we're all going to have ebbs and flows in life. We're never going to be
Sure.
always our ideal self. But I think when we can notice when those like triggers get tripped, then we can start to take action then to soothe or solve whatever might be going on.
Yeah. And I think I like that you use the word triggers because there's almost always one for most people, if not everybody. And I think we all, if we wanted to try and like picture somebody, we all know somebody that like no matter what might be going on, they're always pointing out what's going wrong, no matter
Yeah.
how good other things could be going, whether it's in a
Right.
relationship, like you said, they're always pointing out the things that are wrong with their partner or their friend
Yeah.
to other people, or, no matter if maybe traffic was flowing really good the majority of the month, but they had one bad day, that's the one
Right.
that they're going to talk about instead of all the other 29 good days.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think one thing that's true, I know this is true for me, and I've had to kind of grow through some of these money mindset things as well, is unfortunately, maybe until you get like into the collegiate level, there's like virtually no financial education in our school system, right? And most people, how they learned about finances are from their parents and how they were raised and whatnot. And if your parents were the mindset of like save, 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 we got to save for a rainy day. We can't do this, we can't do that because what if something were to happen?
Right.
Well, then that's the mindset that you start to adopt, and that's kind of what I've noticed was true of myself and kind of my wife as well, is we both kind of grew up in families where that was the approach. Like we're
Yeah.
living paycheck to paycheck. We have the things that we need, but we don't always have the things that we want. And the mindset is we don't have the money to afford the things that we want because we have to save for these just in case problems. And,
Mm-hmm.
our parents had gone through some of the financial depression times where they lost money in their savings and in their the stock market and everything like that. So then they were concerned that what if this happens again? What are we going to have?
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't really until I got out of school, got working, and then really made the switch from the traditional physical therapy office that is very like insurance based healthcare system
Mm-hmm.
to the side of the, I guess I'll say, healthcare and wellness landscape that we're on now. I don't even want to say we're part of the healthcare system because kind of feel like we're sort of removed from the traditional healthcare system and like playing a separate game where we're more in this like fee for service model where
Hmm.
people know the quality that they're going to receive at a different physical therapy office. They choose to come pay maybe a little bit more per visit to come see us. And now we are having conversations about the value of things and what are you paying for,
Hmm.
where you don't really have to do that in most medical offices. The providers are having zero conversations about finances, and they don't know how the billing works, they don't know how the insurance company works, and they're not the ones having those conversations with clients. But now we are. And I think it is it's so eye-opening and brings to light some of the hidden or buried feelings that you have about money, uh, when you actually finally have to start talking about it and you never did. Like, you don't know how you come across sometimes to people because you didn't have to have that conversation before.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's a big reason of why I do what I do, because like I've lived through the lack of education, not knowing where
Mm-hmm.
to get education, not feeling like I deserved financial advice because I wasn't making a lot of money. Um, and like you're right, where do we get it? I will say I've been a part of a big initiative to start putting financial literacy in schools. I developed very comprehensive curriculum with Intuit that's going to reach about 5 million high schoolers across the country. So I do
Awesome.
know there's stuff that's going on, but it's far from where it needs to be. But on the tail end of what you were saying, like having to have that conversation because you've never had to have it before. I feel like I just had a conversation like that this morning with new clients. I prioritize making space for the emotional conversation around money in my practice because
Yeah.
if we're honest, money is emotional. It is emotionally driven. We have emotional baggage based on how we grew up or the house that we were living in, our parents' relationship to money that likely we've not investigated because often it's uncomfortable, it's
Mm-hmm.
overwhelming. And most of the time, I see people tending toward avoidance when it comes to really sitting down with money and finances. So, from my perspective, and I know I'm biased because I come from a social emotional background, but
Yeah.
in my perspective, if we're not addressing your financial, if we're not addressing your emotional relationship to money, then we're not going to be as optimal as we can be in the implementation of the tactical side of your plan, right?
Sure.
It's if we've got behavioral blocks that we're not addressing, it's going to impede the progress that you have on your actual plan, or it's
Yeah.
going to potentially prevent you from really receiving and benefiting and enjoying the resources that you are building up and saving because you don't know how to have a healthy relationship to it, right? Or you're going
Yep.
to spend down everything that you save. So for me, I have a large focus on the emotional component of money in the practice. Because to me it underlies everything, and if we can, again, it's root cause analysis. If we can really get to the root of what's going on, it's going to just one, it creates more buy-in from my clients because we're actually getting to the root of the problem, and then it helps them make more progress, which then they
Yeah.
see, and again it like helps change some of that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
um yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons we connect well is like we'd want to get down to the root of the problem, right? Because you can't, whether we're talking about finances or whether we're talking about
Yeah.
physical therapy, you can't keep slapping treatments at symptoms and
Right.
expect the real root of the issue to change. You can't keep
Right.
making more money if you don't address the issues that are present, because more money is not going to solve the problems.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so, with that in mind, and the connection you have to the social emotional side of the brain from all the background that you have, I'm curious, what are some of like the most common questions or concerns that you field from clients when you start working with them, that you end up like talking to them about the most? Like, what are some of the most common questions you get from the folks you end up working with?
Will I ever retire? And when
Mhm.
can I retire? Basically. Because a lot of times there is no plan. They're just kind of hoping and praying and wishing that it's going to work out, regardless. And I find this across levels of income and success. I have very successful attorneys, tech CEOs. They also don't know if and when they can retire compared to someone who's maybe a closer to a starving artist or a startup business. They're
Mhm.
just getting started building their wealth. They also don't know. So it's interesting to see that is true across the spectrum of wealth.
Mm-hmm.
So will I ever retire and when is a big question. The second most common question is how do I make smart choices with my money? Which means something a little different for everybody, but oftentimes I find that they're talking about investing and taxes and just wanting to be efficient is what I find that typically means for people. A lot of times I'll find people who, if they say, I know my money is not working for me, it usually means they've got a chunk of money, if not all, sitting in cash in their investment portfolios. um,
Yeah.
so a lot of times it comes down to, but it's often framed by that. I just want to make smart choices with my money. That oftentimes also usually means like having an actual savings plan, a savings and
Mm-hmm.
contribution plan. They want help figuring out where their dollars should be going. And that often then leads into another question. I get a lot of questions around spending plans, budgeting,
Mm.
cash flow. I find that a lot of advisors don't talk about this. And again, I'm like, this is a missed opportunity because it's underlying a lot of the work we're going to do. Yes, there's one side of the spectrum where we're doing goal-based planning, where it's like, if these are your goals, this is what you're going to have to do to reach those goals. But then we have to
Mm-hmm.
compare it with reality and be like, does
Yeah.
your current cash flow support this? Or are we going to have to find a negotiation somewhere?
Yeah.
So that a lot of people need help figuring out like, how much am I spending? Where are my dollars going? I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners who they're earning 250, 500,000 in revenue sometimes, but they're still living paycheck to paycheck. They're not taking home enough. And it's like, well, we got to figure out like, where's
Where's it going?
your money going?
Yeah.
So I get a
Yep.
lot of questions around spending plans as well. People also just want efficiency with taxes.
Yeah.
A lot of times people confuse what I do with what an accountant might do. So I'll
Sure. Yep.
oftentimes have to point them in that direction. Obviously, there's crossover, but still separate services. So those are oftentimes the biggest questions. But
Yeah.
then another question is like, what's next? Like, a lot of my clients are in the accumulation phase. They're building their wealth.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, I'm making good money. I've figured some stuff out, but like, how do I actually build wealth in a way that feels sustainable, in a way that's aligned with my values, in a way that is actually going to get me to my goals, help me to retire. So a lot of times I attract people who are more heart-centered, they're values-based, mission-driven. I have such a big emphasis on values-based planning in my process. Like that's the anchor of everything we do is your values. And to your earlier point, it helps give meaning to the money, right? Where it's like,
Yeah.
what is this all
What's it
for?
for? Yeah,
It's not
exactly.
just the money. We're helping you live a life that feels uniquely yours and the best your life is. And so a lot of people desire that alignment of their values and money, and they don't really
Mm-hmm.
know where to begin, or they don't have the time to figure it out on their own, or they don't want to.
Yeah.
So I think those are some of the most common questions I get.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and I'm not surprised to hear you say some of those. Because honestly and vulnerably, like budgeting is not something that I have really ever done a whole lot of, nor do I enjoy doing it. I feel like I have a good savings plan and
Yeah.
have buckets set up of like where the money's going and that it's going there first before some of the other spending takes place. But
Hmm.
man, I don't enjoy sitting down, putting a budget together and seeing like what the
Yeah.
money in, money out looks like.
Hmm.
Um, and let me say one that I hear a lot sometimes from people because I wish, and this kind of goes back to the way you were raised and stuff and like the avoidance of having conversations about money. I wish that I had started working with somebody like yourself at an earlier age. I started working with the first financial advisor I think that I began working with when I was, oh man, what was I, 26 maybe? Somewhere in that range. I had graduated from PT school, had moved down from Wisconsin to the Atlanta, Georgia area, and then got connected with somebody. I think it was through like Mass Mutual maybe, and they too were somebody that like sort of specialized in working with like healthcare providers, and
Mm.
we set up some um, life insurance and retirement savings things that were like outside of the place I was employed. Like they had their own policies and 401k and stuff, but we'd set up some additional things. Well, then I moved and I relocated And for no other reason really than like working with somebody that I already knew and already trusted on a personal level, I switched to working with a different individual that was closer to where I could actually like meet with them in person, because I had
Mm,
relocated back up to the Midwest. And that's the person I've continued to work with now, although he's moved from like one firm to another firm to another firm.
mm-hmm.
And he and I continue to put plans in place. But one of the things I hear a lot of times, because I've talked to, whether it's coworkers or whether it's friends or siblings, and who are younger than me, and say, you should be doing this now. Like
Mm-hmm.
you shouldn't. And I hear, well, I'll start to save or I'll work with an advisor when I have enough money to do
I
so.
know. I hear
And I
it all
hear
the
that all
time.
the time. And I'm no financial advisor, but what I do know is how interest works. And like, I know the sooner you start doing these things, the better off you're going to be later down the road. So I'm sure you get that objection sometimes of, I
Yeah.
just don't have the money to be able to work with you. So how do you handle that conversation? Because we both know that like that's not going to solve the problem.
Yeah.
So like, how do we handle that scenario?
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's kind of a nuanced answer, right? Because
Sure.
I wish I had gotten started investing 10 years sooner than I did. I didn't know though,
Yeah.
it's a
You don't know
shame.
what you don't know. Yeah,
But
exactly.
I mean, the Chinese proverb fits so fittingly in this business that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. And the second
Hmm.
best time is today, right? Like we wish we all would have started 20 years ago, but we didn't. So let's get started today. So when I get that objection, because I'll also get it's either I don't have the money to do it right now, or I'll work with you when my life settles down. I'm like,
Yeah.
sure.
We get that. We get
Let me
that
know
too.
when that
Yeah.
happens.
We get that too. Yeah.
And I'm like, that's the thing though. It's like one, that's never going to happen. It's never going to be the perfect time. And two, having an advisor and a plan is going to help you navigate those life changes smoother and easier. As far as like not having the money. So I've set up my practice. I also, and one of the reasons I resonate with your practice is I also largely operate on a fee for advice model. So the bulk of my business comes from flat fee clients where they're paying me a
Hmm.
flat quarterly fee just out of their cash flow every
Yeah.
quarter. That's not tied to their assets or income or anything like that. So it keeps everything super transparent. So
Yeah.
I will have the conversation early on. I also have to make sure that it does fit in their budget because, they have to be able to afford that cash flow. And I try and do my best to be honest about like,
Yeah.
this may not make sense for you right now. I've tried to offer some different
Try some
nets
tears or
to
something. Yeah.
catch people.
Hmm.
Yeah, to offer that to people. And eventually I would like to get my practice to a place where I've got people who are willing to be sponsors so that I
Yeah.
can take
Totally.
on people who don't have the money, but I can tell have the spirit and are ready to begin. Because like the one thing I cannot do for you is I cannot make you more money just from an income perspective, right? Like
Right.
there's only so much I can do there. I can guide you. So sometimes I can't solve that objection, but a
Yeah.
lot of times part of the way that I've solved the problem is eliminating any kind of asset minimum and working on the flat fees so that I can work with people before they've developed a level of assets that some advisors may have a minimum for.
Yeah.
So I work with people who they're running $1 million business plus, but they still have a negative net worth, you
Yep.
know? And so it's like those people I have the model to take those people in and start to build their net worth back up. They have the cash flow, they have the revenue to support it.
Yeah.
Um, on the flip side, though, too, I still have the flexibility to manage assets, charge a fee, operate a little bit more traditionally in case that's an easier model for people. Let's say they have a hefty IRA that they can transfer over to me. I can charge a percentage of that and we can do some work that way as well. So I'm trying to create a practice that has the flexibility to meet people where they are based
Yeah.
on where they're coming to me from, while still, of course, building my practice in a way that's scalable and sustainable and profitable for myself. But
Of course.
I think it's, I've been working in the trauma informed sphere for so long that like choice is so important to me, giving people choice and helping
Yeah.
them. It's informing them like how to make the best choice. Um, so that's a long winding way of saying, like, sometimes it's a legitimate objection and it makes sense to come back later. Like, people have to be ready. You got to be ready to dive into the process. I'm going to ask things of you. I'm going to ask you to show up. You got to like do the things I'm telling you to do. And so I try and make it in my own sales cycle and process to figure out if they're really ready to start. And then if I can tell that they are, but there's maybe some less legitimate excuses going on, try and help them see, like, truly the cost of waiting is exponential the older we get year over year because of the interest. Again, I had that conversation earlier today. I'm like, the sheer factor of time is the most important factor when it comes to the ease and success of your investments. Not only does it set you up for more success, it just makes everything easier. The risk is so much lower the earlier you start. And again, sometimes people will slip into well, I'm 45 and I'm so behind, and there's somewhat of a defeatist attitude there.
Sure. Yeah.
But I'm like, hey, like, again, do you want to start at all? Like, or do you want to wait another 20 years and then have even less options at your fingertips, So it's kind of just helping people frame that. I learned that we have a harder time as humans empathizing with our future self than we do a complete stranger. And so I view my job as a future self advocate. It's like, my job is to help you take care of that future self, because I know you are not connected to it. And it's easy to like push that self off. And so that's part of the objection to overcome. It's like, how do I help you care about that future self and realize that there's a cost to waiting. And sometimes people, they can't afford not to begin, even if it might be tight on the budget at first. It's like, if I'm doing my job, we should be freeing up money, organizing it, helping you get on a plan to build your wealth, increase it over time, hopefully save you some money in other aspects. So, there should be a return on the services that I'm providing for you. And at the same time, like, if people aren't willing to see the value in that after however many conversations, then I probably won't be the one to change their mind.
Yeah, no, that's true. And, we see the same thing in our practice, as I know do a lot of other medical providers or personal trainers or whoever. One, we can't do it for anybody. I don't fix, or no one other team member on our team at Physio, like, we don't fix people's back pain, right? They fix their back pain. We help guide them in that direction. We help educate them, give them tools, and we do treatment with them, but like, it's not our journey. It's not our thing that we're fixing. It's theirs. So, and we know we can't work with every individual. Our schedules only hold so many slots. Like, we can only see so many people. We'll continue to add good providers to our team as we're able to do that. But sometimes, the number of objections that people have when we're speaking with them on the phone or out at an event or something is like, now is just not a good time, or maybe there's a financial objection, right? And but they don't want to say that it's a financial objection. They say something else. I need to talk to my spouse, or it's just not the right time. But just like you said, well, when is the right time to address this back pain that you've been dealing with for, several years? If it's not 5 years ago, today is the next best time that you can start addressing that, because it's only going to get harder to address the longer we wait to do that. And it's only going to cost more money from our perspective the longer that you wait. The sooner we can start working with someone, the less expensive their treatment's going to be, the more they're going to be able to do the things that they want to do, the more fulfilling their life will be. And it saves them money. It saves us and them headaches, because it's easier to work with people when we get them in sooner. We have an easier time getting them to feel how they want to feel so they can do their things. So, so I totally get that from both sides. So when you do have a conversation with somebody who, whether they're ready to start working with you or not, what are some of like the resources or things that you recommend to them? Like, do you recommend books to people, or a financial podcast, or like, are there things that you find that you're recommending to people to help them start to become a little bit more, like, financially astute, to like put the pieces into practice, to learn more about these things that they're uneducated on the financial side?
Mm-hmm.
so that they can start really implementing these things?
Yeah, good question. It totally depends. I I think part of the value that I do bring as an advisor is I'm like resource heavy and connection heavy, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm a relational networking person. So I've built my business on relations and strategic partnerships and resources. Like I want to vet any resource that my clients might need and then give them two or three choices. Like when they need a CPA, great. I've got a few choices that I have personally vetted and recommend. You choose which one you like the best. Estate attorneys, business advisors, you name it, mortgage lenders, real estate agents.
Right.
I try and have like so many professional resources at my fingertips so that I can just save them time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As far as other resources goes, it just depends. It depends on if they're that type of person who wants extra resources and is going to dig in on their own. I
Yeah.
attract a lot of DIYers because I do the flat fee model and it lets them
Yeah.
like stay in control. So for those people or the people who love learning, there's one of my favorite podcasts. She's a personal finance expert. It's called So Money, hosted by Farnoosh Torabi. It's one of my favorite podcasts. I mean, tons of books. And it just depends again on kind of like, where are you falling and what might you need? Mindset wise, I love Jen Sincero's You Are a Badass at Making Money. It's a
Mm-hmm.
great book. Barry Tesler, who's actually a Colorado person. She lives in Boulder. She's got a book called The Art of Money that has like so many tools and tips inside of it, ranging from, mindset, emotional to some more tactical implementation stuff. I really loved The Psychology of Money. Morgan Housel, I believe, wrote that. That was such an enjoyable read. I'll probably read it again. There's also like classic investing books, The Simple Path to Wealth, The Little Book of Common Sense Investing. What else? Like, what do I
I
have?
figured you had a
The
list.
Intelligent Investor. I Will Teach You to Be Rich. I mean, so many. And yet I also find like, right, it depends. They're either like one of two camps, like pretty hardcore DIY, or they're like, part of the reason they are hiring me is they're like, I
Exactly.
don't want to, I don't want to
Yeah.
deal with the extra stuff. Like, please just
Yeah,
organize my stuff for me and tell me what
exactly.
to do.
It's the difference between DIY and DFY. Like, is it do it yourself or is it done for you
Exactly.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
the same reason, right? Somebody would hire a travel advisor for a complicated trip that you're trying to take. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with all these logistics and figure all this out. I'd like to hire a professional to help me do this.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah. And I realized that, like I was only flat fee for a while and I wasn't doing asset management. Cause like it's so easy to do it on your own these days. And there's so many resources and
Sure.
the majority of people can get away without a complicated, sophisticated investment strategy,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're building wealth. It changes a little bit when you're ready to like start taking distributions, but for the majority of us, it doesn't have to be super complex. And so for me, I'm like, if you can and want to manage your own money, go for it. And I will be here as a second set of eyes and an expert to
Mm-hmm.
help you and advise you. But then I realized that there's a lot of people, especially like along that creative and entrepreneurial type, where it's like, if I'm not doing it for them, they won't.
Right.
So
Right.
I wanted to create, like I said, more flexibility and choice in my practice to still be able to meet people where they are, but not box people into one way of working.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Now, I know, Allie, that we're like a little short on time, but I wanted to ask you one more question uh, before we wrap this up, because, we kind of went off on a couple tangents. And to the people that are listening to the show, like around the topic of finances or allowing your money to be a tool for you to be able to do the mission and the value based stuff and work that you want to be able to do. Like, before we wrap this up, just like, what are one or two more things that you would tell people who have, like, a strong set of values, but might be sort of struggling on the financial side of things, or figuring out how can I bring my dreams or my vision to light? I don't know what to do, because I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, is they choose to do nothing because they don't know what to do. And there's a lot of options out there and they just don't know. So then they do nothing. So
Yeah.
like, before we wrap up, if you could just, tell the people that are listening to this one or two more things of like recommendations you have or thoughts that you have that they might be feeling, what would those things be?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say that's why I have a job. It's hard to do it on your own.
Mm-hmm.
So, outsource it if you can. But to start, I would say when you want to start aligning your money with your values and pointing in the direction of your goals, the first thing I would recommend you do is print off the last spending statements. So print off your most recent credit card statements, bank statements, any account where you spend money. And then also get clear on your values. Do a values exercise. You can find them on the internet. Find a way to clarify your own values, maybe narrow it down to 5. And then go through your spending statements line by line and look at it from the perspective of your values. I love to ask the question to people, if you were to die tomorrow and someone took a look at your bank statements, would they know what is important to you?
Ooh,
It
I like that.
usually stops people in their tracks and they're like, oh no. So I'm like,
Yeah.
go do it yourself. Take a look at your spending, look at it from the lens of your values. And that's a great place to start aligning your money with your values. Where is your money actually going? And is it reflective of what actually matters to you? So that's one place I would start. The second place I would say is make specific goals. A lot of times people will have a vague sense of goals, or they don't know how to set goals. Make, the classic SMART goals, make them specific and measurable,
Yeah.
attainable. So really the bottom line when it comes to financial goals is you want to figure out what the goal is, and you can compartmentalize it by short term, which would be maybe in the next 1 to 2 years, midterm 2 to 5 years, long term 5 plus 10 plus
Yeah.
years. And then clarify how much money you're going to need. How much money am I going to need exactly to buy that house? How much money am I going to need to buy a trailer? And then set a date, set a timeline that you want to achieve that goal by. Make down a few notes of why this is important to you, and just write down some specifics, get yourself excited about the goal. And then start organizing it so that you actually have clarity on exactly how much money you need to think about generating and saving through either savings or investments, and then lay out a reasonable time frame that you think you might be able to accomplish those things with your current cash flow. And sometimes you realize the goals are too big. Sometimes you realize they're really not that big at all and they're quite attainable. And that's usually where I find people where it's like, this actually is rather attainable. So I'd say just start getting specific, and don't be afraid to ask for help whenever you run into roadblocks, whether it's with an advisor or the million resources there are on the internet these days.
Man, I thought that was great. That question is so impactful. Like, if someone were to look at your spending, would they know what's important to you?
I know.
Because I think a lot of times we don't even know, like, where is our money going? Is it, if somebody, we like to ask those same questions to our clients when, they're dealing with, say, knee pain or something, and maybe they're a runner. And it's like, okay, well, we know you want to address your knee pain. That's why you're here. But why? Like, why do you want your knee to feel better? Oh, because I love to run. I want to be able to run X, Y, and Z. Well, why? Why is running so important to you? Like, what about running makes it important? And when we can really get down to those things and peel back those onion layers to figure out the reason behind the thing, they are so much more motivated to take a handle on it, and to take accountability towards addressing it, right? And stick to the plan instead of it just, like you said, being some vague thing that I hope to do this someday. Maybe I'll get there. The likelihood that you're going to get there is probably not very good.
Right. Because then you also just think oh, I just need to make a bunch of money. And it's like, well, no, let's actually set some goals. How much money do you actually need? And it's all about reverse engineering, how much money do you need? And then let's figure out how to make that happen.
Yeah.
And it just, like you said, it motivates people. It ascribes meaning to money that is otherwise neutral. Like money is just a neutral tool until we
Mhm.
ascribe meaning to it. And so when we
Sure.
can align it with our values, it just makes it makes decision making easier. It just makes everything easier, clearer, and yeah, like you said, more meaningful.
Yeah. No, I love this. And for you guys that are listening, man, if you need somebody to be a resource for you on the financial side of things, I think Allie would be a great recommendation for me. On that note, if somebody does want to reach out to you, Allie, to connect with you, get in touch, ask some questions, or potentially want to work with you after listening to this episode, what's the best way for them to do that, to get in touch with you?
Yeah, for sure. A few ways. You can go to my website, Beckmann Financial. Beckmann is spelled Beckmann, and then the word financial.com. That's a good way. There's all sorts of buttons that'll take you either to a contact form or directly to my calendar. You can schedule a free call with me. So the website is a good way. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm super active on LinkedIn. I post a bunch of stuff, so you can follow me there, Allie Beckmann. And then you can also feel free to email me as well. I'll respond to you. It'll come directly to me, and that's just Allie, ALLIE at BeckmannFinancial.com.
Awesome. And we'll put those things, the website, the LinkedIn, and the email contact in the show notes for the show for you guys. Allie, really appreciate your time this afternoon. And in case you guys didn't know, I don't think she said it nor I said it, but Allie is also here local to the Denver, Colorado area. So if you are living here and you want to work with somebody local, there we've got that box checked for you. But thanks again for joining us, and I just really appreciate your time having this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was such an enjoyable conversation, really refreshing. So much alignment here, and hopefully your listeners got some value out of it. I am so grateful for the opportunity.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. And again, to all of you who tune in to listen to this episode of The Code, as you know, we appreciate it. And if you've not done so already, you've probably heard me say on another episode, we are hoping to increase our reviews on this podcast to get up to 200 5-star reviews, whatever platform that you chose to use to listen to this, so that we can get it out in front of more people to help them hear the conversations that we're having with our awesome interview guests, and just find us on The Code. So if you haven't done that, please go do so. And we'll catch you guys next time on another episode of The Code.